Moving now from the Reds to the Bengals, and obviously a lot of the focus now on the draft and the wrapping up of what we think probably the additions to this Bengals roster for the offseason. This draft specifically in 2025, it felt like most Bengals fans were very honed in and focused that this team was going to take immediate impact players. And while that was the case for the later rounds in the draft, Shamar Stewart, the player they took at 17, seems like a big swing on upside. How much of a surprise was that pick, and how much of a project do you think the organization views him as?
Shamar Stewart will play probably 40 to 60% of the snaps in 2025, and they needed more pass rush, and he'll definitely be better than what they had. So there's a clear path to Shamar Stewart being an impact piece. Now, what I think has been overblown is this pick 17, wasn't traits versus production, because it's not like they were looking at edge rushers who had 14 sacks like Mike Green and Donovan Izaraku. I don't think we're next up on their board. What this was traits versus positional value. So defensive tackle Derek Harmon, safety Malachi Starks, linebacker John Campbell, all less premium positions than a guy who could potentially, they're hoping is the replacement for Trey Hendrickson on the edge starting in 2026. So he'll contribute. It definitely didn't fill their needs. It's definitely a bet on the guys they already had in-house developing. But this was probably going to be the Bengals' last chance to find a Trey Hendrickson replacement, because they don't plan to be picking this high again, and because they won't have the money in free agency to pay for that. So that probably all added up to why Stewart was picked.
Speaking of replacements, following Shamar Stewart, defensive additions for the Bengals went and drafted two linebackers, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina and Barrett Carter from Clemson. I think everyone in Bengals Nation is connecting the dots there. What does that mean for the future of Jermaine Pratt and Al Golden's defense?
Yeah, read the interviews on Bengals.com. You know what I mean? When they're talking about the room, and this is on Bengals.com, and they're not mentioning Jermaine. It's a big bet on Demetrius Knight. This is the Bengals team that hasn't drafted a guy on either side of the ball to start since Jamar Chase. And, Cordell Volson was a week one starter, but Jackson Carman was supposed to be the starter. Going back, and this is just off the top of my head, I'm just going back. Jesse Bates started right away in 2018, but he wasn't drafted to start. They ended up cutting, I believe, Reggie Nelson that year after Bates beat him out at camp. I'd have to go back farther. The last time the Bengals drafted someone to start, let alone on day 2, not day 1, on the defensive side of the ball. So it's a shift. It's a bet. He's 25. He's experienced. He's about all the right stuff. He's a smart guy, so that should help. But the Bengals will have to do something they haven't in years and be able to find an immediate defensive contributor.
Dan Pitcher, after the third-round pick of Dylan Fairchild, the guard from Georgia, mentioned that he will have an opportunity to start at guard this year. Do you expect the same for fifth-round pick Jalen Rivers from Miami to have a chance to start at guard? And could the Bengals realistically roll out 2 rookie guards on week 1 this year?
He could get thrown in there. I'm betting more that he starts out as the swing tackle, because that flexibility lets Cody Ford get basically all of his snaps at right guard this offseason. I would still tab Cody as the favorite, because he did show something last. He's not a flashy player, but there's tape, there's experience, there's scheme continuity with Cody Ford. They know exactly what that looks like, and he was fine at guard. He's been fine at guard whenever he's gotten that opportunity. Now, what was it? It was 2021, you don't remember this, but Deontay Smith ended up entering the guard competition as a rookie right away, and he lost, but there were a bunch of injuries, and they had to cobble things together in camp, and there's Deontay Smith with the first team, and now he didn't take advantage of that opportunity. But if the right combination of injuries and circumstance happens and Rivers ends up with the first team and he looks good, we've seen much crazier things on the Bengals offensive line during training camp. So certainly could be a possibility, but I do think he'll probably start out behind Ford, behind Fairchild, behind Patrick. And honestly, I'd put him behind Volson as well, even though Volson's contractual status is its own thing.
Moving on to other contractual statuses, Zack Moss's contract was reworked earlier last week, and I think that made a lot of fans think running back was probably off the table for the draft with the addition of Samaje Perine earlier in this free agency as well. Obviously not the case, as the Bengals draft Tahj Brooks out of Texas Tech, an uber-productive running back in the 6th round. What role will Tahj Brooks play early in this season with those 3 more established backs that the Bengals are familiar with?
I'll start here. I don't expect them to carry 4 on the active game day roster. I think they'll carry all 4 on the 53, but when inactives come about, usually you'll just have 3. So that'll kind of be a fun training camp battle. Zack Moss, I think, was one of the 32 best running backs in the NFL last year before he got hurt. That's fine. There's an efficiency, an ability to hit singles, an ability to get the 4 yards and keep you on schedule, plus some ability in pass protection as well. You'd like to see him be better on checkdowns. Perine, great check down guy, great pass pro guy. We know exactly what he is. Brooks is probably the second best ball carrier in the room and probably has the highest upside on kick returns. Special teams could be a factor here that would weigh in Brooks' favor because he does have more special teams ability. So let's see how these guys look in camp. But Brooks, they felt in the deepest running back class we've seen in a long time, was too good of a value to pass up. Even though they did have much bigger needs on the roster, including one we haven't talked much about. Like they could have used a wide receiver in round 6, but the value with Brooks was too high to pass on.
Some of those positions that we expected the Bengals to draft and they did not, they tried to address maybe in undrafted free agency, bringing in multiple wide receivers like you just said, but most notably Seth McLaughlin, the center from Ohio State, and Howard Cross, the defensive lineman from Notre Dame. Those two names are two that I've seen Bengals fans thrown out a lot about potentially making this roster. Do you expect any of these undrafted free agents to make this 53-man roster? And with McLaughlin specifically, has there been any update on his injury and when he will be ready to return?
I don't have an update on that injury. We'll probably get that at rookie minicamp when all these guys come in. Looking at defensive tackle, I'll tell you how this is going to go. They're going to be in the mix. They're going to want to carry 5. They'll prefer to carry 5. If it turns out, Cross and Gregory can't play, then they could, keep Ced Johnson on the roster and go 6 and 4. But here's what's going to happen. I'm telling you, they're going to be looking at the waiver wire just like they were in 2022 on the final day of camp. And if J. Tufele 2.0 is out there, I know nobody, I know there are some Drew Sample stands on this show. I don't know that there were any J. Tufele stands on this show, but he was a fine 53rd man on the roster. Like, if you can find someone like that on waiver wire day, that's what it's for, and that's how the Bengals have used it, to find the guy on the rookie contract who got cut at the spot you weren't able to or didn't end up addressing in the draft. Like, the Bengals have done this at tight end before, like Devin Asiasi. Like, they've done it at guard before, Max Sharp. I actually think all 3 of those guys were the same day. So keep an eye out on the waiver wire defensive tackle. If not, or if Cross or Gregory flashes and has a great preseason, which they'd need to, sure, there's a path for that.
Another position people expected the Bengals to attack in the draft that we left without an addition at was safety, that defensive back room. Justin Simmons has been public about saying he would be interested in playing for the Bengals, playing for Cincinnati. Do you think there's any chance that the Bengals take a swing at one of those higher-level free agents still available, like a Dalton Risner at guard or Simmons at free safety after the draft now?
I know that they were looking at safeties in this draft, and there were certainly scenarios that ended up with the Bengals drafting a safety in this draft. Honestly, when you look at depth, you make the case that free safety depth is the biggest question. And I'm Dejon Anthony is great, or was before he kind of got in his own way from there were just some missed assignments we all saw. But Dejon Anthony has real tools to be a sub-package cover guy, not much of a free safety. That's just not how I've seen him be used successfully going back to training camp. Tyson Anderson profiles even more of an in the box if he does play the field, but really a true special teamer. So they don't have a backup free safety. Geno Stone, I'm going to move my head around as I kind of insinuate, didn't have a good year.
Right.
I'd be interested in adding a starting free safety. Will the Bengals? Frankly, I just don't know. I would use the Jermaine Pratt money on free safety, either depth or starting in Justin Simmons, but I don't know what they're going to do.
Charlie, last thing on the way out, offseason started out loud. Thought some of the offseason drama would have kind of bled in further into the calendar year. That's not the case now that the draft is done, and once some of the draft reaction kind of dies down a bit. I know schedule release coming out here shortly as well, but do you anticipate, I know for you and us, we need content. Content's always a good thing, but it might be a pretty quiet Bengals summer, correct? I mean, do you anticipate a quiet Bengals summer leading into camp? Is there any landmines out there potentially that we're not considering at this moment?
I anticipate a quiet Bengals summer because I don't expect an update on Trey Hendrickson until training camp. That's just my read, my gut instinct on the situation. Looking at the rest of the roster, I mean, the extension candidates would be from the 2022 class, where I guess the Dax Hill fifth-year option will be the big one, and that'll be in the next couple of days. But Cam isn't in a spot to sign an extension. I think he'd rather bet on himself and try to put last season behind him. Guys who get benched typically don't end up signing extensions when they believe they can be pretty close to the top of their position. Who else was in that 2022 class? I guess that would be Zach Carter. Obviously, he's gone. Cordell Volson, you thought would be in line for an extension. Obviously, that doesn't seem to be the case as he competes for a starting role now. So it is lined up to be pretty quiet.
All right, Charlie Goldsmith, big fan favorite here on the show. Charlie, tell everyone where they could find your work. I know you're dabbling in a lot of different working areas right now. Where can people find your work now?
Well, first, I just want to say I appreciate you guys. I'd like to apologize for my runny nose that I've dealt with this morning. If you see me using a tissue on here, I'd like to apologize for that. Check out charlieschalkboard.substack.com. Breakdowns, analysis, breaking news reporting, all that fun stuff. It's a lot of fun. We just got our 2,000th subscriber this morning. How about that?
There we go.
So, Charlie's Chalkboard.
All right, good stuff. Charlie, you the man. We always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.